first-time director is supposed to pick a really simple subject you can tell very easily, right? I'm interested, you've been a producer, and this is the first film you directed, so why this film?
Well, it just came up naturally. Well, as the movie explains, we started this, Javier and me together. We didn't know we were going to make a movie. And at one point, we said, okay, we have to make a movie, who can direct it? And I said, Javier, you know what, I think I know what I want to tell, how to tell it. He said, okay. And I said, if you believe in me, we'll go for it. And he said, okay, let's do it. So that's how it came about. I mean, it just came up naturally.
And how did the two of you know each other?
He owes me a lot of money. He's a very famous producer in Spain, and he owes me a lot of money. Today, so.
That's really bonding.
And this project has been in the works for a long time. I believe you started in 2008, is that right?
Yes, we started.
And so my question for everybody here on the stage really is I'm interested in knowing sort of how the situation has changed in the Western Sahara since 2008. And then also personally for you, how has your perspective on the situation changed as you sort of learn more about it through this film? Yeah, let's start.
Well, I mean, when we started making the movie, the situation was pretty much unknown, as it is still today. When the Arab Spring came, about 2 years after we started shooting, we thought that that could change the situation. In fact, as you can see, it has all to do with the Arab Spring. But really, the status quo today has not changed a lot. There's been some movements, some diplomatic movements, but the reality on the ground is exactly the same as the one that we found 4 years ago.
Does that match up with the reason of the other folks up here? Would you agree that's about true?
I would add one thing. You mentioned me how do you compare it with 2008. I personally don't know. I learned about we spent with the president of the Arab Space Center, Kerry Kennedy, a week in Western Sahara and the refugee camps at the end of August. And it's hard to say whether there is a change between 2008 and today. But what you can really say is that it's not going to change unless people know what's going on. That's why this movie is so important. That's why the report we prepare is so important. Invisibility is the most fertile ground for violation of human rights. And the purpose of this movie, the purpose of our report, the purpose of everybody here in the audience should be to make this well known, so people know, and that's when things are going to start to change, not before.
And Carrie, I read your op-ed when you came back from that trip. It was pretty powerful and disturbing. Would you mind telling a little bit about what that trip was like and what I mean? Just even the photographs I saw were pretty disturbing.
Sure. Can you hear me without this? No. Okay. Darn it.
It's worth a shot.
Okay, so we went there to, it's interesting what has changed since 2008. One of the reasons that it's hard for any of us to answer that question is because the government of Morocco stops people from going and making assessments. So there really hasn't been a lot of opportunity to do that. But we went in, as Santiago said, in the end of August to do an assessment of the human rights situation. We met with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who were victims of human rights violations. First of all, when you go to Laayoune, that's the capital of Morocco, occupied Western Sahara. The first thing you notice is the military presence. It is, no doubt about it, a military occupation. There's military trucks on virtually every street corner. There's police on every street corner and police vehicles, and people are followed constantly. They have their equivalent of the Stasi is called the DST, and they are everywhere, and they make no attempt to be secretive about following people. They are right there in the streets following people wherever they go. We heard hundreds and hundreds of stories of people who were beaten by police, who were tortured, who had their family members disappeared, who were accused of crimes they had never committed, women who were raped and sexually abused. The violations just went on and on and on. And then one day we were driving down the street. We had quite a big delegation, so we took 2 cars. We were driving down the street with Aminatu Hadar, who was in this film, and we saw a group of policemen who were just pounding on these women, and a group of women who were sort of trying to protect one woman in particular who was just being beaten to a pulp. And we pulled over to the side of the road to take a closer look, and my daughter was in the car. She's 17 years old, and she pulled out her camera, Nikon, started taking pictures. As soon as the DST saw her do that, they rushed, they left this sort of beating this woman and came over and surrounded our car, and so that we couldn't see out. And Mariah, who was mysteriously unintimidated by this, continued to take pictures, and the window was rolled down, and so one of these thugs, and I mean they are scary, big, mean guys, and he was practically foaming at the mouth, screaming at my daughter, luckily in Arabic, which she couldn't understand because those words were unrepeatable. But anyway, so he lunged into the car to grab her camera and grazed her face, and nonetheless, she still took those photographs. And then two members of our delegation who were in the car behind us still had a completely clear view of what was going on. And they followed this woman who had been beaten to a hospital, and they took photographs of her, and her face was swollen and black and blue and just a total mess. It was like a hamburger face. And the next day, we went into to meet with more victims, and it happened that the first group of people we met with were women. Am I talking too long?
No,
Okay.
no, keep going.
Anyway, were these women. It was a women's group, and it was the very same group who we had seen the day before. And so they each told their stories. One who had been imprisoned at the age of 13 with her mother and her father, and lived in prison till she was 24. I mean, what could a 13-year-old do, right? And she had been, one of her eyes had been poked out when she was in prison. This guy, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell this part of the story. So when the car was surrounded, I said to Aminatu, who are these people? And she said, that's the DST. And that's the guy, and he pointed to one of them, and she said, that's the guy who told my 13-year-old son, I will rape you until you're paralyzed because of what your mother does. So the next day, this woman who had her eyes poked out, she said it was poked out by the same guy. What was his name? Okay, so whatever his name was. And we went around the room, and each person had some story about this one thug. But then as we're sitting there in the room, the landlord comes in, and he says, I've just been served with papers of crime I didn't commit because I'm renting this apartment to you, and because that's the place we were meeting. A few minutes later, we meet with a group of lawyers. Now this is 5 lawyers. They said they've taken 500 cases over the last 12 years of people who had criticized the Kingdom of Morocco and called for independence, and each one of them had been falsely accused of a crime. In those 500 cases, they only got 3 acquittals in 12 years. And so once you're accused, your life is just destroyed. Then people came in and said the hospital workers who led us into the hospital to take the photographs of the woman had all been told they were going to be fired for allowing us to have access. Then after that, we went and met with the prosecutor, and we said to him, have you ever prosecuted a crime of police brutality or torture? And he said, no, because I've never seen any evidence of it. And then we went and met with the fellow from the Ministry of Interior, and he's actually the head honcho. He runs Western Sahara on behalf of the king. And we told him this whole story, everything I just said to you, we told him. And there was one woman there, this very, very dignified, extraordinary woman, and she said, I am a justice of the Inter-American Court for Human Rights, and I saw this man take this woman and pound her in the face as hard as he could, again and again and again. And then we went all around and told the story. And we showed him the photographs. And he looked at the photographs, and he looked at us, and he said, well, I don't know if the stories you're telling me are true or not. And we all know that photographs can lie. So I'll just have to look into this. The next day, the headlines in the paper was that there was a fake demonstration on the streets, and a woman pretended to be hurt, but in fact, she was perfectly fine. So that's what you're up against. Every place we went, we were followed by 2 men in a black car, 2 men in a white car, a guy on a motorcycle, and there were 2 thugs sitting in the bottom of our hotel 24/7. So that was our experience.
And with Lily, was that